we'll be talking about our local future, preparing for local self-sufficiency and resilience. So local future and myself and many people have two challenges in the future. One challenge, which I think is kind of a cultural challenge, is to stop and reverse our undesirable impacts on the earth. And another goal is to eliminate our reliance on an unsustainable global economic system. Our culture has lots of undesirable impacts on land, the oceans, the atmosphere. The one that's getting the most press nowadays is our impact on the atmosphere. Here's a chart that simply shows how much carbon dioxide is in the atmosphere. It goes back to 1960 up to the present day, and it shows how the amount has increased over the years. This is my favorite graph just to show the change that's happened. If you notice, there's the red there, that's the actual amount of carbon dioxide. It goes up and down during the year because the northern hemisphere has a lot more green stuff, and so during the summer, right now, it absorbs a lot of carbon dioxide. But then during the winter time, the southern hemisphere doesn't have as much green stuff, and so the level kind of goes up. The trend has been going up for a long time. The idea behind the greenhouse effect is pretty straightforward. The sun sends the sunlight onto the earth. Some of it's reflected directly back into outer space. Some of it's absorbed by the surface of the earth. And then that heat from the earth radiates back outwards into space. But on its way out, it'll hit these greenhouse gas molecules like carbon dioxide or methane, and those molecules grab that heat energy and they let it go again. And when they let it go, it might go spinning out into space, or it might go spinning back to the earth, and it continues to warm the earth. If we didn't have these greenhouse gases, then nighttime temperatures would be extremely cold every single night. So it's very important that we have those gases. But it's also important that the amount of those gases in the atmosphere remain level. And of course, we're adding to those gases. And this chart shows how, compared to the era from the 40s to the 80s, the recent decade, we've been able to measure lots of warming all over the earth. It's not even warming, and it doesn't mean that one winter isn't colder than the next winter, but the overall trend is that there's a lot of areas that are getting warmer. There are a few areas that are getting cooler, but the overall pattern is that things are getting warmer. So that's all I'm going to say about environment and how we impact the environment. We know that we want to change our behavior towards the planet. We know we want to have the planet around for our kids, our grandkids, and we want to leave a beautiful, rich place for them. Next, I'm going to talk about our unsustainable economic system. And there are three main points I'm going to touch on. First is that our economic system was never designed, as far as it has been designed, for resource limits. It was never designed for example, the day when coal would run out or the day when oil would run out. Our system isn't designed to address that. The second thing is that our economic system is based on a continuous growth model. If we don't have growth in our economic system, then we either have a recession, unemployment, or an inflation, or a combination of those. So that again makes it an unsustainable system. A sustainable system would be able to continue keeping everyone employed no matter what was going on in the world. And of course our community where we live right now has complete reliance on this one global economic system that has been kind of coming together over the last several decades. So we'll look at this a little bit. First talking about limits, and I'm going to focus on the energy limits that we're looking at. So you may be aware that United States oil production, U.S. was the #1 oil producer in the world for a number of years, especially through the 50s. This was very good times for the United States. We had abundant resources, and we were pumping around 1960, 1970, we pumped about 10 million barrels of oil out of the U.S. each day, and we were only consuming about 7. So we're pumping out 10, consuming over only 7, we were exporting about 3 million barrels a day, which was the most of any country in the world. We were the #1 oil exporter. We were like the Saudi Arabia of the world. But we got to a point where the amount of oil left in the ground was running, not really running out, but it was kind of getting harder to pump it out. It was harder to find, and the amount of oil produced in the U.S. declined. What this is called is a resource peak, where all efforts being made to find the resource and extract the resource, but no matter how much money is put to the effort, and no matter how high the prices go, and you might remember that the price went up 2 times in a very large way in the 80s, that doesn't necessarily mean that you can get any more out of the ground, because it's just, there's only so much to get out. So the U.S., this was actually predicted that the U.S. would reach a resource peak for oil. It was predicted in the 50s, based on how much oil had been discovered at that point, and we already realized that we were discovering less and less and less in the U.S. So for the U.S. projection in the future, you know, there's still oil, obviously. This is still 1 million barrels a day that we could theoretically extract all the way out for 20 years, but less and less oil available in the future. Now this illustrates how global discoveries, we found lots of oil all around the world, but most of those discoveries took place in the 60s and the 70s. The amount of discoveries, the amount of oil discovered in the 90s and the 2000s has been much, much less. And so you can imagine that you are, that this is your income. And these are your work years where your income is high, but your expenses are moderate. And so you have a lot of money coming into retirement or whatever to play with. But as retirement goes along, this is showing that we've been consuming more oil. The retirement example would be the spending level goes up, which I know is not typical of people in retirement. But here's the income level. So what we're doing right now in the world is we're spending about 5 times more than we are earning each year as far as oil is concerned. And obviously that won't continue all that long. So our projection for the oil peak, and this adds up all the oil in the entire world that's being extracted each day. And numbers come from the government for the most part. When you add up the United States, Europe, Russia, the Middle East, all the oil in the world that's being extracted each day, and this is projecting forward, this is probably the best case scenario. This is the best we could possibly do getting oil out. So notice there's still lots of oil. There's probably as much oil as we've already extracted. But the maximum we could get out each year declines, and it could be for a very long time. Now notice this is of concern because this is very soon, right about now. And of course this is a future projection, so we don't know exactly how it's going to happen. So this is a resource limit that our economy has not been designed to function under. Our economy has been rolling along for a long time. When this first oil spike happened in the early 70s, that caused a huge recession, and it caused the president to take the United States off the gold standard, which caused a huge amount of inflation. The second oil spike here, which was, I think, the Iran-Iraq war, that again drove the prices up, which reduced consumption in the U.S. People bought a lot of K cars and things like that. But that also led to a major recession at the start of the 80s. So it's not surprising that many people who are looking at this graph are saying that our economic system is going to have major things happening to it very soon. Recessions, depressions, those types of things. The government agrees with this. A couple of years ago, it published a report from the Government Accounting Agency that said that an imminent peak and sharp decline in oil production could cause a worldwide depression. And the report also talks about how the government's not really doing much to address this issue. There are many books that have been written on this issue, and I've read some of them, but after a while they get repetitive, so I haven't read them all. This graph kind of shows how much money we're spending on oil as a percentage of the gross domestic product. So for a long time, we were only spending about 2% of our gross domestic product on getting oil. In the early 70s, when we reached that peak, it had been going down. But as soon as the U.S. hit that peak and our production went down, we had to start importing. And that's when we became subject to the Middle East price levels. And the price level went up compared to the GDP. We had a recession here, and we had a second recession here, because there was so much money simply leaving the U.S. And then the most recent recession this past year has probably been, in major part, precipitated by this increase in oil prices. This kind of shows, if you're a business person, for example, you have to decide the price of something you're going to set. So on this side, we have the demand for whatever it is. Suppose you're selling cars or whatever. On this side, you have the supply of cars. In this case, it's oil. And the price is where these two lines cross. For all the way from the World War II until about the 70s, the two were moving together. We were increasing the supply globally at the same time as we were increasing the demand. We were more people, more cars, but we were also finding more oil. Now let's talk about what happened in the last 3 or 4 years. So in the last 3 or 4 years, the price level was starting, say, $20 a barrel. We continued to use more cars, and so on. So our demand increased, but as our demand increased, the supply did not increase. That caused the price level to go up. And then we came to a point where the economic system, which isn't designed to deal with this, came into a state of recession. And so these two are likely to go back and forth together for a little while yet. So it would not be surprising at all if we saw oil prices go way up and then way down, and they'd be associated with what the government would call recovery and recession, or the business cycle, some like to call it. So in review, oil prices are volatile. The U.S. oil did peak in 1970. Global discoveries peaked in the 50s. Global oil production probably peaked in June of last year because the prices were so high. Everyone was trying to get oil out. Everybody in the world that had a drill was trying to get the oil out. And they were able to get oil production up to almost 90 million barrels a day. But since then, it's come down. That may have been the peak. It's hard to tell. And of course, there are economic consequences anytime oil changes, the supply changes. So next, let's look at the growth model of the U.S. economy and the global economy. And before we go into that, let's talk just about money a little bit. And I'm going to try to explain what's happened in the economy in the last year, or 2 years. So first, money basics. The creation of money. Most money, not all money, but most money is created when we take out loans, when we take out mortgages. We go to the bank, we promise to pay, money is created in a promise from the bank in exchange for the mortgage paper or the loan paper. So the more loans that are taken out, the larger the money supply gets. Homes, cars, boats, anything that we take loans out for, businesses and industry, when they take loans out, that increases the money supply. When government borrows, so to speak, that increases the money supply. Another thing that acts kind of like the creation of money is the speed at which someone spends the money. So a lot of times people will talk about the local economy, and if $1 comes into the economy, it actually does $5 worth of business because it goes from the bowling alley to the gas station to the restaurant before it leaves the community. So the speed at which the money is spent, if people have positive expectations for the future, they think they're going to keep their jobs and they're going to have good business, they're more likely to spend the money quickly rather than holding on to it. And also, if they have expectations of future inflation, they're likely to buy things now rather than waiting for later. So for example, if you knew for sure that the price of gasoline at the store was going to go up tomorrow, you would be more likely to buy gasoline than if you expected it to go down tomorrow. So this is how money is created in our global system. through the issuance of loans and through the more quickly we spend things. What's happened over the last couple of years is that we've seen the destruction of money. When a foreclosure occurs, the bank has to write down the amount of money on their books. So now the mortgage paper isn't worth $100,000 anymore. Maybe it's only worth $50,000 when the house is sold. So the bank has to write down the amount of money, and that money is no longer available. It's destroyed. It's eliminated. You and I and everybody in the country are probably in the process of deleveraging right now, which means we're trying to pay off as many of our loans as we can comfortably, or even uncomfortably. And as we pay off loans, that's also shrinking the money supply. We're destroying the money supply. We're destroying money. And the third thing that happens in the process of money destruction, it's not exactly destruction of money, but it's similar, is delaying spending. So instead of going buying the gasoline today, if you really need that money in your pocket, you wait until the tank is on E, and then you spend it then. So delayed spending has almost the same impact of less money in the economy. If people have negative economic expectations, if they think there's going to be a recession that's going to continue for 2 years, they're less likely to buy things, less likely to spend money. Also, if they expect prices to go down on something like automobiles, then they're likely to delay their purchases. So these are some basics about our money system right now. Most money, obviously not bills, those are printed, but most money in the bank, electronic money, is created through the making of loans, and money is destroyed when the loans are paid down. This is called, you could call this the private interest penalty model for the economy, or you could call it the debt growth model for the economy. So now let's look at what's actually happened a little bit more in the past year or so. So here's how the average American spends their money. They spend about $2,000 per year on gasoline and motor oil. And of course they spend money on a lot of other things. But if this slice increases, if the price of gasoline goes from $2 to $4 a gallon, and if they're unable to decrease their use of that gasoline, now suddenly this slice becomes a lot larger. They only have a limited amount of income, so what other slices get impacted by that? And most of this money, of course, for gasoline and oil, that money does not stay in the U.S. because 2/3 of our oil is imported. So two-thirds of the money we spend for gasoline goes out of the country, and it doesn't help our economy. From the Wall Street Journal, when the gasoline price did hit $4 a barrel, $4 a gallon, soaring fuel prices and disappointing unemployment data have reignited fears that the nation's economy will slip into recession. This was a year ago. Slip into recession or pull back further. The recession had already started by last summer. Pull back further if a recession is already underway. And spending on fuel as a share of wage income has shot above 6%. So 6% of the money we made, we were spending on fuel. Approaching 7 to 8% seen during the 80s price surge. So we can see that this would definitely have an impact on people's spending, their expectations for the future, and the economy as a whole. So again, I'll revisit this chart. When the oil prices went up in the past, up to 7%, 6% of GDP, that caused a major recession. It's probably not surprising that when the prices went up again, that we had a recession as a result. So the 2005-2008 gas price increase from $2 to $4. Buyers tended to delay purchases because they didn't feel as rich because they were spending more money for gas all the time. They spent less on homes, RVs, cars, appliances, vacations, and other big ticket items. For the business person, the sellers, you could say, that led to, fewer sales, which in many cases led to businesses being overstocked with bills yet to pay, expecting more income. You could think of this as GM or any company that's had a lot of difficulty in the last few years. Forced to lower prices in order to make some kind of income for the business, ending up suffering losses, a lot of times having to lay off people, closing shops. This leads to less people being employed, which leads to less tax revenue for the whatever tax unit it is. And that, of course, leads to less public or government employees. So this is kind of what has happened. This is another way of looking at what has happened over the past few years. People bought less, impacted businesses, and this is kind of the sequence of what the business goes through. One more look at how gasoline prices impacted everything. This again is all the spending that you would do in a year: food, transportation, recreation, housing. And the gasoline part of the circle was getting larger. More people were spending more money on gasoline. That was squeezing other things out. So people were spending more money on gasoline. Their actual behavior was to buy less cars and trucks. Okay, maybe the transportation amount of money people spent on transportation was the same, but as they were spending $4 a gallon on gasoline, less new trucks, cars and trucks were being purchased. So this is a major problem with our economic system right now, as if gas prices go very high, it squeezes out all these other businesses. All right, so back to the money basics. These are the basic things that aren't taught in high school, and a lot of times they're not taught in college. But money creation is in the making of loans. As long as loans are being made, money supply increases. As long as there's positive expectations for the future, or rising prices, or a combination, people buy quickly. This is good for the economy, so to speak, because it grows the money supply. The money supply right now is shrinking. The Federal Reserve is doing what it can to increase the money supply, and it can do quite a few things, but we are paying off our loans so quickly, and there are so many write-downs that the money supply is quickly shrinking. People have negative expectations for the future, and so that's impacting our economy. This graph simply shows our unemployment rate, depending on how you count unemployed people. These would be people that are getting unemployment checks. These would include people that aren't getting unemployment checks. These would include people that have been off the unemployment checks for a long time, discouraged workers, so to speak. And depending on how you count it, our unemployment rate could be anywhere from, in the US, 16 to 20%. Gross domestic product grew many years. There's a recession here, grew for some years, recession, grew, recession, recession. So the recession probably started around 2005, the technical part of the recession. And people started noticing that when they couldn't sell their houses for what they wanted to sell them for. What's the name of this crisis? The newspaper reporters and TV reporters aren't sure exactly what to call it. They come up with all different names for it. So here's a question. Our global economy is built on the assumption that we're going to have continuous growth in the economy, but oil is the major thing that we use to drive our economy. So as the oil supply decreases, the amount of oil we can get out, what's going to happen to the economy if we're around here right now? Are we going to end up having a constant GDP, or are we going to have a constantly declining GDP? Would that mean recession, depression, or what might be called a collapse of the economy? Or is something else going to happen? Of course, it's hard to predict the future, other than we know that oil is a limited resource. We know we tried to get it out as fast as we could, and we're facing resource limits just like we did in the US. For us, where we live right here, of course, we're completely reliant on the global economy, first of all for food. I mean, I go to the farmer's market and support our local farmers when I have a chance, but most of the food that I buy comes from outside Middleville area. So our reliance on the global economy is total for food. If you recall back in September, October, Hank Paulson, the Secretary of the Treasury, they had this emergency meeting when the stock market was dropping, and the major concern there was that the money system was going to stop working, that people's credit cards would stop working, that the banks' checks would not clear anymore, and that how would we feed everybody in the country if the money system collapsed and stopped working? So that was the major concern the government had at that time. Of course, we're also reliant on energy. Middleville does have a dam, but other than that, Middleville area doesn't actually generate much energy. You probably could by growing things and burning them, but we don't produce many transportation fuels. And of course, everyone is reliant on this one form of global money. There may be different currencies and different papers, but it's all one money system. We're hoping to prepare for rapid changes in the future. What we'll need to do is replace the distant resources we're currently enjoying with local resources. The most direct strategies are to reduce our energy consumption as much as we can. That reduces how much we're dependent on the system. And to produce food, energy, and other products locally. Local production of food, of course, would be critical to the viability of any community. Right now, Thornapple Township probably grows plenty of food, but we probably don't grow the food that we would want to eat constantly, unless we constantly want to eat corn on the cob. And we don't really have food storage in Middleville, so that would be a thing to address in the future. Energy, we import all our electricity and all our gasoline into the area. The local alternatives would be to generate energy directly from sun, wind, water, and plants, of course. Reducing heating can be done. There are building standards called the Passive House Building Standard. If you build a house to the Passive House Standard, you use 90% less energy in heating and cooling. So instead of having a $3,000 heating bill, you only have a $300 heating bill each year. The major components of that is in the structure of the wall. This is a double wall, triple pane glass. But the price of the house, while it's slightly higher, you end up getting it back because of the lower energy bills. So long-term goals, reverse our undesirable impacts on the earth, eliminate our complete reliance on the global economy for food, energy, and money, prepare ourselves to thrive in a time of challenge and uncertainty. Now, what Local Future's been doing locally is having community programs down at the EMS building, newspaper columns, online videos and articles. We have a book and video library, and of course we're happy to come speak to any group that would like to have us. And we're hosting a major conference up at Crystal Mountain. We have a website, localfuture.org, with videos. There's another organization that's similar called transitionus.org. For more information on oil, theoildrum.com. For overall information, energybulletin.net. Postcarbon.net is a nonprofit that does a lot of similar work, as well as Community Solution. For those who are interested in what's going to happen with the stock market, lifeaftertheoilcrash.net has a lot of, it just links to articles from the New York Times and Wall Street Journal that have something to do with the future. And for people that are very interested, Chris Martinson has put together a set of videos called The Crash Course to bring everybody up on the information. So thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it. Have a great afternoon.